And I think we're on. I'm never sure with YouTube. Okay. Are we on? I think we're on.
Well, the most bogus thing about the Rittenhouse, the most bogus thing about the Rittenhouse trial is that all of this stuff we already knew. And conservatives have been saying it for the last year. We knew it, right?
Yes, obviously we're talking about the Kyle trial. Yeah, obviously we're talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. Hello, everyone. I kind of hit start in the middle of what we were talking about. But yeah, if you haven't been following the trial, oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah, this
is... my point actually is that if you haven't been following the trial, you haven't missed all that newer information if you've listened to some conservative commentators on YouTube, because they've gone over everything that they've said. But how it's come out has been entertaining, certainly.
Oh, yeah, there's been people that have been working on the case that have flat out said, like, listen, this never should have gone to trial. It's pretty clearly that it was pretty clear right from the get-go it was self-defense. Even the cops who arrested Kyle said it was self-defense. He was arrested and charged purely for political purposes, only.
Yeah, and there's speculation that the prosecution is either not putting in their best effort or intentionally throwing this case because
they are desperate. They are desperate, and it shows.
Perhaps they don't genuinely want a conviction, but just want to appease the leftist mobs here.
No. If that's all they were doing, they would be behaving very differently. You wouldn't see any of the stuff like we saw when they tried to cross Kyle, which I will be going over in detail in the podcast. So.
Yeah, I like to agree with Tim Pool. I think what they were trying to do is that they were trying to get a mistrial, but without prejudice, because the idea is that they'll say, "Oh, Judge Schroeder was biased," and they're gonna just gonna keep trying to mistrial until they find a judge that's pro gun control and all that, and say, Kyle's a vigilante.
He's already said if he mistrials, it'll be with prejudice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what they were trying to go for before the judge said that. They were trying to go for a mistrial without prejudice. So the idea was that they would get they could just keep mistrialing until they got a judge that would say yes.
Yeah, and I think
good luck with that.
I think the judge was about to say that he, and that gives me grounds for a mistrial when he was ranting to the prosecutor, berating the prosecutor, and then he kind of cut himself off and he said, "I'll just leave it at that." So he didn't finish his thought there. I'm thinking he was going to say something about declaring a mistrial, but that he would rather allow the jury to come back with an innocent verdict, because that would be.
Well, yeah, I mean,
better outcome for everyone.
That's what a lot of people are thinking. Like they think they can kind of tell that. You can kind of tell by the look of Judge Schroeder that he knows this trial is a waste of time, and he knows Kyle Rittenhouse is innocent, but because of the politicization of it, he wants to at the very least give the jury their due.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, far left individuals when they finally actually see the footage that they like. Anna Kasparian, she finally sees the footage, which she should have watched before she ever opened her mouth about the case.
Yeah.
Right?
She said, well, like new information.
No, it's not new information. She doesn't.
Yeah. She was like, new information has come. Like, no, Anna, this has been out for a year.
Right. But even she, it can't delude herself enough to believe that Kyle Rittenhouse is completely guilty here. She had to really, even she was forced to think about this, which says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, JC.
I mean, I've heard, there's been plenty of people that have said, it's like, listen, I'm on the left and I agree, guns should be heavily regulated, but I do have to agree, this is clearly self-defense, Well,
and a lot of people are now saying, oh, well, the judge is a conservative and he's a Trump guy and everything. I looked it up on Ballotpedia. When he was first appointed back in 1983, he was appointed by a Democrat.
Yeah.
He's a Democratic appointment. He's been elected since then, but his first appointment was Democratic.
Yeah.
But he has "God Bless America" or "God Bless the USA" as his ringtone, whichever it was.
Yeah, which is like an immensely popular song that probably a lot of people have.
Right. So it's just astounding that the left believes that, it's inappropriate for a judge, a person appointed with the task of applying the laws of the United States, should have a ringtone celebrating the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, how terrible. Well, and they're also trying to make him out to be a racist because when they broke for lunch one time, he had made a and what they said was he made a comment of like, I hope it's not Asian food or something like that, and that was racist. Which even if he said that wouldn't be racist, but that wasn't what he was saying. And it's clear if you watch the trial, they were talking about the fact that the food was late. And he said that I hope the Asian food isn't on a slow boat from Long Island. You know, he was making a joke, but you know, he stammers over his words a bit. And when they transcribed the stammering, they transcribed it in such a way when he was saying, I hope it's not Asian food or something like that.
Yep. And here's the thing. The only reason why somebody would use the words Asian food is because they're specifically trying to avoid, like it would be like a PC knee-jerk reaction, trying not to say Chinese or Japanese.
There's tons of people that no joke, they get offended if you say, I want to order some Chinese food, and they're like, that stuff at the restaurant isn't actual Chinese food.
I think it was hilarious. I think it was hilarious when BuzzFeed did this thing where, and I mean, kudos on them for publishing the video anyway, but they were having actual Chinese people try American Chinese food for the first time, and they were like, oh, see, this isn't real Chinese food, and you want the real Chinese food. And the Asians were like, I like this better than the real Chinese food.
Oh, yeah, people, look, nothing against the Chinese people, but my dad worked a lot in China, and he's eaten actual authentic Chinese food, and I'm sorry to say, it's not very tasty. It's very bitter. It's not, they don't have access to the same types of sugar like we do, so their food tends to be bland at worst, really bitter or sour at best.
And salty, because they usually put a lot of sodium in the soy sauce.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sodium. Now that's a perfect segue for me to rant about Thunderfoot.
I know what you're going to talk about.
So, I originally subscribed to Thunderfoot way back in the day, like 2007. And he was making all these videos about creationists and stuff, and he was kind of entertaining back then. But, lately, I have a real hard time clicking unsubscribe to people I've been subscribed to for 15 years, right?
Yeah.
But lately, all his videos are just ranting about these ideas that other people have and why they wouldn't work. And, he's hit or miss on that. He's, obviously, a lot of the criticisms that he has towards Elon Musk's ideas are just really stupid.
Yeah, he really hates Elon Musk for some reason.
Oh yeah, he can't stand the guy.
Something tells me if Elon Musk were to come out and say, "Hey everyone, did you know 2 + 2 = 4?" Thunderfoot would probably be one of those people saying, "Well, no, actually, you're supposed to round it, and then when you actually do this, actually you'll find that 2 + 2 = 5."
Yeah.
I used to do that as a demonstration when I taught. When I taught Excel, I would show people I had the cells, right? And it said 2 and 2, and I said, okay, now hit auto sum, and it will pop up 5, and they're like, what? Because I had it rounded, and it was actually like 2.4 plus 2.4 = 4.8, and it was rounding.
Anyway, the whole Thunderfoot thing, this one was finally different. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Sorry, my headset is starting to lose battery, so I got to get it.
Hey, Daniel.
Have plans here. Anyways, so Thunderfoot's latest video actually takes it in a different direction. For once, he did what he probably should do and put out one of his own ideas. But the idea that he has is absolute crap when you actually think about it for a little while, and especially since he's a chemist, he should be able to figure out some of the major problems here. So his idea was to use sodium metal to as an energy storage medium for like jet fuel and marine fuel. And the biggest glaring problem that this screams out on me, the only abundant source of sodium to do something like this, and his idea is that, you know, you burn the sodium, it becomes sodium oxide that will react with carbon dioxide, form sodium carbonate, and sequester the carbon that way, and also create this fine dispersed white reflective cloud that will persist in the atmosphere for a while. So for one thing, combating climate change by trying to increase Earth's albedo to reduce the light coming down through the atmosphere is just a terrible idea, because for one thing, that'll also impact plants' ability to grow for photosynthesis. So that'll also impact the biosphere's capacity to sequester carbon that way. But sidestepping that even, you know, sodium's a really poor choice for this, because where do you get sodium? What's the most abundant source of sodium?
The salt in the oceans, I guess.
Yes, the salt in the oceans. I mean, there are some alkaline lakes and stuff, some sodium deposits there.
Like Salt Lake City and the Dead Sea and all that, yeah.
Well, specifically ones where it's bound to those sodium deposits are actually bound to carbon dioxide, so you'd be releasing carbon dioxide in making the sodium to begin with. So that wouldn't work. Well, for the most part, yeah. I don't think there's any sodium hydroxide deposits naturally present on Earth. Certainly not enough to actually have a significant effect at sequestering carbon. So really the only economical source of sodium is seawater, right? So you electrolyze sodium chloride. So you get a whole bunch of sodium, but then you also get a whole bunch of chlorine gas. And on the molar ratio that, you know, if you were to synthesize enough sodium to sequester all of the current carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, or the current excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you'd be pumping out levels of chlorine into the atmosphere that would reach 200-300 parts per million, which
that would be bad.
Is about 1 part per million is a significant irritant. And, you know, you can handle exposure at 1 parts per million for a few hours, but, you know, 200-300, that would kill all air-breathing terrestrial life on Earth. Of course, it actually wouldn't do that because it would come out of the atmosphere, and it would rain it down as bleach, basically, and acidic bleach at that, and react with the carbon dioxide, with carbonate minerals, and release CO2 back into the atmosphere. So you could never actually get to 200 parts per million, but that also just means that you could have.
Thunderfoot is a chemist. You'd think he would know this.
All I have to say Shane, is you and Fourth Root are a bunch of nerds.
Well, I mean, that's what I do for a living. I am a chemist. So
I noticed that every time you join.
I only got my bachelor's degree in chemistry. He's supposed to be a PhD. He's supposed to know better. This is why Thunderfoot gets to me so often, is because he's in the same industry as I am. He's a chemist like I am, but he's got a PhD, but he's so much dumber than me. And it just feels like nobody this dumb should ever be able to get a PhD. No,
Well, he stayed he stayed in school longer than you did. The longer you stay in a U.S. school, the dumber you get.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I took. I've had how many credit hours? Let's see. There's 120 for a bachelor's, so I've had close to 190 credit hours. So he probably hasn't had all that much more for me. Only, I got my degree also in an associate's in videography. So I've had quite a bit of higher education, but I guess I've been a little bit more resistant to the. But he's critical of the left too. He's been critical of feminism and stuff. So to his credit, I don't think it's that the schools made him dumb. I think he's just got that personality type where he just is obsessed with trying to prove that he's the smartest person out there and that he's so much smarter than Elon Musk, who's the richest person on earth. Right? He's jealous of Elon Musk because he thinks he's smarter than Elon Musk and doesn't understand why Elon Musk has $300 billion.
Well, as Scorch posted in the chat, Thunderfoot hates Elon Musk because his existence challenged the idea that only government can innovate and create, only government can fund science and research.
Oh yeah,
and only government can get us into space and so on. Yep. Then
I love how Elon Musk is just like that. Every time the government says the private sector would never be into something, what happens? Elon Musk does something. It's like, oh, we have to subsidize hybrid electrical cars because there's no incentive for the private sector to invent them. What? Elon Musk founded Tesla? Well, we still need the government to go into space. What? Elon Musk is planning a space program?
And for some reason, everyone seems to hate him for it.
Yeah. Well, and now they're going out. Now the left is going after Bill Gates because Bill Gates has funded the development of a molten salt SMR, and everyone's hitting the ceiling like, nuclear. Especially Michael Mann, he of the hockey stick. And it's supposed to make you wonder: do these people have some kind of back pocket in the solar and wind industries or something?
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I imagine so. It follow the money, and obviously there's going to be a lot of opposition to nuclear power because it is the most viable alternative to fossil fuels. Those fossil fuel companies aren't going to go down without a fight. So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe he's in the back pocket of the oil companies because the oil companies profit. Look what happened in Germany when they said, hey, we're going all renewables, and now they're burning more oil and coal than ever. Whereas France went nuclear and all of that went down. But yeah, I mean, could you want anything safer than a molten salt SMR? Just to explain, SMR is small modular reactor. They're reactors that are mass produced in a factory. They're completely isolated, insulated, self-contained. Molten salt reactors are incredibly safe. They can't melt down because they're already melted down. That's the molten salt part. All of the safety features are completely passive. So the worst thing that'll happen in the absolute worst case scenario is the reactor stops. That's the worst thing that can happen. And so they just manufacture it. They take it out to the site, install it. At the end of its life, they come out again, take the old one, replace it with the new one, and yeah.
Well, the funny thing about the funny thing about perceived risk is that it's inherently subjective. If a person doesn't understand a technology, that technology is inherently dangerous to them, but not dangerous to the people, not necessarily dangerous to the people who understand it.
Yeah, I mean,
because risk is what you don't know. Risk lies in what you don't know. So if you don't understand it, you don't know. I can understand why somebody would be hesitant. But what's their mistake is when they mistake their own ignorance as something objectively, as it being objectively dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but I mean, the thing is, with nuclear, it's all the result of misinformation. Because everyone's saying, well, it was because of 3 Mile Island and, Chernobyl. Even before 3 Mile Island, they were hitting the panic button on it.
Probably.
Because they kept associating it with nuclear bombs.
Yeah, I mean, Shane, going back to, I wanted to say this real quickly. That's actually kind of why I jokingly told this to some of my friends. If there truly is like extremely advanced intelligent life out there that's several miles ahead of us technology-wise, I know the reason why they haven't visited us, because they view us the same way we view the people of Sentinelese Island. It's like, don't go to these people, they're too dangerous. They'll shoot at you. Yeah, I can imagine they're looking at us and, they look at our history and it's like, seriously? They discovered the power of the atom thousands of years before many other people, much quicker than any other species had discovered atomic energy, and all they could think about doing with it was making it into a big bomb?
Yeah.
Yeah. My attitude about alien life is that the most likely explanation for why we don't see aliens is that life, at least life becoming intelligent, is so rare that the nearest other intelligent civilization is probably billions of light years away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not in this galaxy. It's not in any neighboring galaxies. And the reason I say that is because we have never... can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The reason I say that is because we have never discovered the heat signature of Dyson spheres, and we should actually be able to discover these, like whole galaxies that have been, every star has been converted to a Dyson sphere, which would glow brightly in the infrared spectrum, but not in the visible light spectrum.
I just don't get why everyone thinks like a Dyson sphere would be completely inevitable. Do you really need that much power that you're going to go through that kind of crazy engineering?
Let me explain why. Okay, it's not that would be a necessarily common outcome. It's that would occasionally occur. Occasionally, you would get a civilization that would desire to expand ad nauseum without limit, and it's actually quite capable of just expanding its population until it's absorbing all the energy it can get from its star, and then moving on to other stars. So maybe most alien civilizations don't choose to go that route, but any one alien civilization that does go that route will inevitably just expand and take over its whole galaxy within the course of a few billion years. So, the fact that we don't see these infrared glowing galaxies in the sky, and we can see millions of them, suggests that life must be very rare.
I just don't get how it would even happen once, considering the incredible issues that you'd have with the gravity. I mean, I could see a ring, but a ring, it would only be the case if it just happened to be, on the same plane with us.
Why would you confine yourself to a ring when you can expand your population by creating by invading other orbital planes and building solar collectors there?
Well, you can, but those would just be separate rings. That wouldn't be like this sphere completely encircling everything.
No, it would be like a rubber band ball eventually. It would be all these different rings at different angles so that they could maximize the amount of sunlight that they're collecting.
Not really, because with each ring you minimize the amount of light you're going to get, because part of the ring is blocked by the other rings as you move out. And it gets to be where it's just such an engineering nightmare for so very little energy increase.
Well, it doesn't have to be a perfect blackout of the sun, right? It just has to create a conspicuously high amount of infrared for the given amount of visible light that we see. So just a significant portion of the star's light getting blocked by.
But when we see that, we say that it's dust because that's exactly what dust does. So if you're talking about other galaxies where we can't really resolve much in the way of individual stars, well, all it's going to say is, well, hey, there's some more dust in this galaxy. Well, and that's even assuming that you're right, which I'm not entirely certain you are.
Well, the dust that we see, though, isn't at that higher temperature that we would expect. We would expect the temperature to be more in line with biological temperatures. Earthly temperatures, because if the dust is in the inner solar system, it's going to be a hotter glow.
Why wouldn't they insulate it? Why would they lose all that heat? No. If the whole idea is to gain as much energy as,
otherwise they get cooked. They have to dissipate as much energy as the star puts out.
Okay, I have no idea what the hell you guys are talking about.
They dissipate it.
But as soon as you get to that point. As soon as you get to the point where that's an issue, you stop building the sphere. Because,
Why build more of... Why not build it bigger and get a higher population?
Because now you're putting out even more heat. You got the same problem as they did with Denard scaling.
No, you're not putting out more heat, right?
You would be, yeah. Second law of thermodynamics, you absolutely would be. And that was the problem with Denard scaling, that as they made processors more and more powerful, as they tried to increase the power by putting more power in, all they were doing was generating more heat than they were able to use the power.
The power that you're putting out in the form of heat is always limited by the amount of the power output of the star for the Dyson swarm.
But you're going to want the power output would be the leftover energy from what you're using. The idea of the Dyson sphere is you're collecting the energy of the star in order to turn it into electricity and other forms of power that you want to be able to use.
Those other
and then once you use it,
everything becomes heat.
Everything left over becomes heat, right?
It doesn't go away when it's used. It
becomes heat.
So yes.
Right. And the more of that you do, the higher ratio of heat to usable energy you get.
No. Sorry, my headset keeps bugging me that I need to charge it. Give me a moment to switch over here.
All right. We can talk about something other people are interested in until he comes back.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Sorry,
we were just gonna...
Now I know. Daniel, now I know how Yarrow Proof felt when he saw Yoda and Mace debating amongst themselves. Oh, it's a council now? It's not just the two of you?
Oh,
yeah. Which, to be fair, that Robot Chicken sketch is accurate to a degree, because when you notice it, it's supposed to be a council where all the members debate, but really all it is just Yoda and Mace and occasionally Kiadi Mundi.
Yeah, kind of is.
It's like we should do this, should we not? Mundu, I disagree, but I do agree it is the right course of action. Mundi, I'm too busy doing something else.
Scorch says, I see humans become either master of biology and give ourselves immortality, or we create a cybernetic society and the human race dies off and our creation continues on, or a mix of these as cyborgs. And he follows that up with, until one of those are done, we won't be able to leave our solar system. Unless you're going to talk about doing generation ships, which is an option, but if you're talking about individuals traveling, you would need something like effective immortality, where it's just really long living, not like, you cut your arm off and you instantly grow a new one or something like that, but just the normal lifespan is 50,000 years or something like that, then a trip to Alpha Centauri just becomes like a Sunday drive, because the longer you live, the shorter time seems to progress. Because like when you're 5 years old and you're waiting for Christmas, that year from one Christmas to another is 20% of your life. Nowadays for me, it's less than 2. And it's like, wow, it's November. We're about ready for Thanksgiving again. Jeez.
Yep.
It sneaks up on me every year.
Yeah, that's why. Yep, that's why. Yeah, that's why. That's why.
There's a channel I'd really like to recommend. It's called Science Futurism with Isaac Arthur, SFIA.
Fort Ruth, you and Shane having this debate is why Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was written.
The font Rainbow Asteroids is called Overlock that I'm using for these.
I'm just kind of taking an interest in that new Wheel of Time adaptation.
Yeah, what's that font called? Hey guys, I discovered a new revolutionary formula that'll save millions of lives. We have to throw it away and dismiss it as fact. Why? It's backed up by years of research. Yes, but you wrote it in Comic Sans.
God.
Yeah,
no, my rule, and I didn't come up with this, but I've heard it, and I think everyone should adopt it. You get to use Comic Sans once in your adult life. You can use it as much as you want when you're a kid, because that's what it's made for. It's made for kids to have fun with. But unless you're something like, a preschool teacher or something like that, and you're using it for that purpose, in your adult life, you get to use Comic Sans once. Pick the one and only time.
The exception would be if you're actually publishing web comics and you're filling in the little talk.
No, they're much better comic fonts than Comic Sans.
I honestly don't get the whole font thing. I say this. Can you read it? Yeah, then use it.
Well, there's different readability for different things. I have no idea why when you have what's something here, like the fine print in pretty much any product, whatever, they write it in Helvetica, and I have no idea why, because Helvetica is a sans serif font, and it's so much harder to read than a serif font when it's that small.
Use Arabic fonts.
I really wish I had the motivation to write, because I really want to write, science fiction parodies and all that. And one idea for a science fiction parody I had is there's this one alien race where they had, the whole font wars, and they found the perfect solution that satisfied everyone. Instead of coming up with ideas on what works, they literally have to train their people to stop subconsciously reading and actually read what's in front of them. They trained them to stop focusing on how it's written and just focus on what's actually being written.
Well, that's actually the idea. The font itself should become an invisible thing, and you're just reading and taking in words. And like if you're reading text in a book, a serif font is good for that, because we don't read individual letters. Even if it's like a big poster with a few words, we'll take in the whole word at one time. You've probably seen that thing where they write out some text, they keep the first and last letter the same and mix up the rest, and it's still readable. In a book, you actually look at a whole line at a time, and the serif fonts help with that. Because they have
nice abilities. That must be a nice ability to have.
No, well, that's what most people do, at least people who read a lot, yeah. You just look at the whole line and take it in.
Yeah, I wonder how much it would drive people crazy if I wrote a book or an essay, and every letter was a different font.
Oh, God. Like one of those old movies where they had the ransom note, and it was just letters cut out of a magazine and pasted on.
I mean,
Tiny Just,
I mean, call me stupid or something, but the whole thing with Comic Sans is I've never actually heard like a decent art, like I've never really, like, and from my personal opinion, I've never heard like an actual decent argument for why you shouldn't use it, other than that it doesn't look professional. Well, a lot of stuff doesn't look professional, but it's considered okay.
It's not meant for that anyway, but it's just not that great. The font weight, it's not that readable. It's not that pleasant to look at. It's just, I don't know. Rainbow Asteroids wants to know what's the difference between sans serif and serif. Serif is when you have those little points on the end of it, like with Times New Roman and Helvetica or Arial. Or sans serif font, sans means without, and so they don't have that. So.
Well, actually, going back to that alien race I was telling you about, the whole point of that alien race is that literally, while they are aware of what fonts are and they know the concept of them, they literally can't see it. So whether or not you write something in Comic Sans Times New Roman or Aria, they won't recognize it because they've literally trained themselves to ignore that subconscious thing, and they only focus on what's being written, so they don't care. They literally can't tell the difference. That's how they train themselves.
So it's like describing the sea as wine dark.
There's a T-shirt that a lot of typographers, like, it was going around a lot when I was in college, and I think people made it into an internet meme earlier in this century. But it's a big, like, Times New Roman S with one of the points gone off, with the pattern of a bullet, and all the pieces of it are down at the bottom, and the caption is, "I shot the serif." I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy.
Has anyone else read?
So the eye is harder to jump on when it's sans serif. Exactly. Yeah. If it were a Helvetica eye, Luxo Jr. would have had a little more trouble with that. Might have fallen off.
Anyone else read the book Hail Mary, Andy Weir?
I love that. Oh my God. Every one of his books gets better and better.
Well, I'd say God. Artemis was a step down from The Martian, but Hail Mary, I'd say, was a step up. Artemis was okay. The whole thing with the spoiler alert, everybody. Big spoiler alert. Don't listen if you want to read Artemis. Okay. The whole thing with Jazz chloroforming the entire colony and nobody died is just like, but everybody passed out. That just was like, okay, that's too.
But as I remember the book, there was a lot of finagling to try and make it that way, because she had to make sure not to do too much. But yeah, I mean, people would have different tolerances to it, so some people would knock out before others.
Right, but plus there would be different concentrations throughout the colony, and actually, she didn't intentionally chloroform them, right? It was an accident. It was an explosion in the reactor that caused chloroform to vent into the colony. So it was an accidental.
Oh, I thought you were talking. If I remember correctly, I thought that was what she was doing at the end when they were trying to get back in. I don't know. I'll have to read it again.
Yeah. She went off and she sabotaged the reactor, the aluminum smelter, right? And she and that one woman and that one guy were the only people who weren't in the colony at the time. And the sabotaging the reactor evolved chloroform, which traveled down the piping, the oxygen pipe to the colony, and everybody in the colony had passed out from chloroform, and they had to figure out how to fix that and return just normal oxygen to the colony within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, people would die.
But people would have died, right? Because they had a certain amount of time before people actually died from the chloroform, and they had to figure out the right amount of oxygen to put in.
Yeah, I was like, okay, that's just a little.
Punko asking the very uncouth question, how old are you? And I don't mind answering, I'm 53, so.
Older than you look.
Thank you, I'm often told that. As is Heather. They think we're in our early 30s, so I'll take it.
Who's your last regeneration?
We should post that there are no more Artemis spoilers unless we want to continue talking.
No, I'm good.
No, because I have no idea what you're talking about because I never read those books.
Andy Weir, the guy who wrote The Martian, if you remember the movie with Matt Damon, he wrote the book. That's really good.
Yeah, he wrote 2 other sci-fi novels, one about a moon colony and the other about an interstellar mission.
I love the way he wrote Project Hail Mary. No spoilers, but when it starts when the main character wakes up out of a medically induced coma, when the robots get him out of the coma, and he has complete amnesia. So he has no idea what's going on, and neither do you. And so you're discovering everything as he does. And like one thing that's really difficult to do in books is flashbacks. It's like, how do you really do a flashback? Well, here, the flashbacks are when he starts remembering pieces of his past. He remembers it, and then they do a chapter where they tell you what happened in the past. And then in the next chapter, when it's back in his present, now he's remembered that and he's reacting to it. So,
I'm calling it now. I'm calling it now. He was a tomato the whole time.
He was what?
He was a tomato the whole time.
A tomato?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, on the subject of sci-fi stuff, I saw a funny parody. It was a parody of the Animatrix and all that, and it was discussing, before, the humans, clouded, the Earth's atmosphere to stop the robots, it shows, they're all talking about how it's like, I got an idea, let's destroy the Earth so there'll be no Earth for the robots to conquer. And one guy's like, why not just activate an EMP pulse over the robot capital and take them all out with that? And we can easily do that. And they're like, what? That'll never work.
I mean, I have a better idea. Why not just take the Earth and push it somewhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't do much damage when the Time Lords tried that.
Sorry, I had to.
Yeah. What was that plan of yours again, Patrick? Push! Yeah.
Just everyone get on one side of the planet and start jumping, and we'll know.
Darius, that was we
Yay!
Already know.
Oh,
pointless
yes.
question, but hey, it's your money.
That's good. Yeah, $2 through a super chat. Yes, you can do a super chat or a donation and make low poly me do a nice little dance. What is your opinion of Ayn Rand and objectivism? And I have some videos on that. I think Ayn Rand had some good ideas. She had some other ideas that weren't so good, and she was a terrible writer. That's the short answer I have of that.
Yeah, and
super chats
for
look
some
like
reason,
on Twidget.
he doesn't count as a philosopher in academia.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's so funny because so many people are like, Ayn Rand was a terrible writer. Yeah, well, so's Karl Marx.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not really like hating it. She was just, and I get that English wasn't her first language, but still, you have to deal with it as it's given to you. And like Anthem, I read that one because they had my daughter read it for class, and I wanted to discuss it with her. And I just found it so hard to get through. I get what she was doing. Like, the idea is, in the society, they've removed all the first person pronouns from the language, and no one has ever taught about them, and so they don't have a concept of them, and they refer to themselves as we because of the collectivist mentality. And one of the things is the guy discovers, among the things he discovers in the cave, is the concept of the words I and me and what that means. And so it's told from the first person, and so whenever he normally say I, he says we, and it just makes it very awkward to read. And I can't help having the thought that a more skilled writer would have been able to phrase things so it wouldn't be that awkward.
Harrison Bergeron sounded more interesting, honestly.
Yeah. Well, it's short, though, isn't it? It's like 5 or 6 pages.
Oh, yeah.
It's not long. And they made, a 2-hour made-for-TV movie out of it. They really expanded that.
You know what? Shane, you know what I really wish I could do to the U.S. Constitution besides make the Bill of Rights, like permanent amendments? You know what I really want to do? Just because I'm getting sick and tired of politicians and leftists saying this all the time, I'm going to make an order saying, okay, we'll keep the Constitution, but we have to replace every single instance of the word people with individuals.
Yeah.
Because so many leftists are saying, we the people, that means the collective. No, it means we the group of individuals that live in the United States.
Naruto, if you're talking about Rush being the Canadian band influenced by Ayn Rand, that wasn't the case originally. It was only the case after, I think, like 2 albums. I think the 3rd album was when Neil Peart came in as the drummer and lyricist, and he was an Ayn Rand fan. And yes, 2112 is their version of Anthem, only instead of discovering, what else does he discovers, like the light bulb and things like that. He discovers a guitar and figures out that it makes a pleasant sound, and he learns about this thing called music, which is something that the priests of the Temple of Syrinx have banned. And you have this wonderful sequence where, Geddy Lee is, singing is like, what is this? What can this strange device be? And you start off, with Alex Lifeson going like plink, 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 and as the guy learns to play the guitar, he gradually gets better and better and better until it screams into a guitar solo that only Alex Lifeson can do. So. But with a very strange ending. I don't think anyone really knows what to make of the ending. But
speaking of Rush, I must confess, when I first heard Rush, I thought Geddy Lee was a woman.
He did have a very high voice back in the day. It's lowered down in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah. But then again, I thought Supertramp was a woman too when I first heard him also, so...
To be fair, I thought the same thing about you, Chris.
Well, that's just my audio. My audio makes my voice sound like I'm a 16-year-old transsexual kid that's going through that's taking puberty blockers. So,
yeah, it's really about a good conversation, a good what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but of a good microphone and good settings for like your compressor and your EQ and all that, and you can hear that over the 10 years of the podcast. You can hear how that's gradually changed over time to make my voice sound better and better.
Anyway, going back to what we originally wanted to talk about, the Rittenhouse trial, why are people still saying that the rifle crossed state lines? It didn't. It was proven multiple times that it didn't cross state lines. But
well, and he was very particular about why that happened, because in order for him to have the rifle in Illinois, he would have had to get, I forget what he called it, but it was some kind of license that you have to get if you're under 18 in order to have a rifle in Illinois. In Wisconsin, it's legal for him to possess a rifle, but not to buy one. So that's why his friend bought it for him and kept it at his dad's house. And I think he said in like May or something like that, he had applied for the license. And of course, what always happens with government stuff like that, there's the backlog, because they don't really want you to get it, and they're working through the backlog. And while they were working through the backlog, the whole, Kenosha thing happened. And so that means that, they denied his license. So he's 18 now, so he can have the rifle himself. He can, he was able to purchase it, from his friend, but, Oh, is another one from Darius. I'm not dancing yet. I don't know why I'm not dancing. Oh, there it is. Although I like ANCAP YouTubers, I'm still skeptical of an ANCAP society. I've never gotten a real answer on how to properly abolish government, won't the entities that have forced security eventually become government? Well, those are actually two different questions. And there's not even a consensus among anarchists. But like my thinking about getting rid of government is you just make it obsolete. Like all of the things the government's doing, you have free market alternatives for it, like cryptocurrency instead of government money, private security instead of police, things like that.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess you could think of it. You could think of it as convincing enough people that this is a good idea, that it becomes ingrained into the culture, that they don't want to establish a government, that no government can actually get a.
Well, you don't want these things done by a monopoly of force, by a monopoly of power.
I think Tim Dyson brought this up one time, and back when he used to do videos on a really old video, he said, "Listen, the first step to realizing that and anarcho-capitalism can work is really sit down and think about it and realize 90% of all the stuff you do every day is done via anarchy. There's no higher authority telling you you have to do this, you have to do that. You're doing almost everything you do because because you want to do it."
Yeah, Bradley McPhee is asking, wasn't the Wild West anarchist? Parts of it were kind of pseudo-anarchy. But a lot of it, like when you look at Tombstone, Arizona, and the things that led to the, things like the gunfight at the OK Corral and all that, that was because when they started establishing towns, they started getting, federal marshals in and appointing sheriffs and doing things like banning guns. Because when you came to town, you had to go to the saloon at the saloon in the inn at the edge of town, and you had to check your guns. And you could get them when you left town, but you couldn't have your guns while you were in town.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of recent people talking about how it's like actually there weren't that many guns in the Wild West because of gun control and all that. But from what I heard, while there were some exceptions like Tombstone and all that, like you said, when you actually really look at, like what they were talking about back then, not a lot of towns, actually enforced that law, even if they had them, simply because, as you pointed out, they were impractical to enforce. And when they were being enforced, they ironically led to more violence and conflict that never would have been there.
Yeah, JC, that might be a good idea for a quickie.
The Hollywood trope about the Wild West towns and stuff where every man has a gun on his hip is probably inaccurate. There probably was a lot less common, and
if you were out in the wilderness, or if you were out, in the open, ranching areas, you had your gun because there were a lot of wild animals out there who could do you a world of hurt. So.
And not to mention another thing too is that the gun laws, that said, no, you have to keep, the guns at the hotel or the saloon. Another reason why they didn't work was because guess what? There were these little things called Derringer pistols. Yep. Yeah, look at Kenosha. That's the thing that people fail to realize. A lot of these people weren't hired by them. I mean,
I'm sorry, I think I was muted for that. Let me restate that because I think I was muted. He had said, we have proof that any other service can be delivered by the market, but will people risk their lives to protect the property rights of people not under contract? And I said, well, Kyle Rittenhouse didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. He stated during the cross-examination when he was asked, why were you there? He said, look, I wasn't paid to do it. What happened was we were going into Kenosha to see what was going on, and we saw this car owner guy and all that, and he was upset because he had lost several $100,000 worth of property because it was being burnt down and damaged all the time. And they were like, our condolences. Is there anything, we can do for you? And, he said, well, if you'd like to, you can you can hang around and, put out any fires and just try to deter people from messing with our business. And they're like, sure, we'll do that, man. That's what happened.
But people are being a little suspicious about them because of the way they testified, and they were clearly, if they weren't lying outright, they were kind of, talking around a lot of issues, when the prosecution had called them up. Kind of sounds like there might be some fishy business practices going on, and if the IRS was paying attention to their testimony, they might be getting a little visit.
Oh because the business owner himself, they kept asking him. It's like, well, how much money did you lose? And he's like, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, my father does all the money.
Oh, when that one said, when Binger kept asking that one, well, what about this? What about that? And he said, well, I don't really work there. And I was like, well, that just made that whole testimony collapse.
Yeah.
C. Naruto wants me to do a month of Lord Killian videos because that'll grow the channel. I have a feeling that I owe you guys that because as hectic as this last month has been for me, I haven't been able to crank out videos like I really want to. So,
do you all want Shane to lose his voice?
Is it true that Gaddafi's economic policies increased wealth in Libya? Of course it did. For the people connected to Gaddafi.
Oh, where's that one? Oh, there it is. Okay.
Bradley McPhee.
Just putting that on the screen.
Yeah, I was just making a joke. It's like, because they always talk about how it's like, oh yeah, they increased wealth in this area by getting more government intervention. It's like, yeah, of course they increased wealth for the people connected to government.
Yeah, and JC had the same comment about it being bad for my throat, and Punko I think is already gone, but I was gonna say bye to him, but I think he said he left, so.
Yeah, he's going to bed, so.
Yeah.
You know what I'm really looking forward to with this Rittenhouse thing, especially if he gets acquitted of all the murder charges. He is going to sue the pants off of every news outlet out there. And
I hope he does. I hope he pulls a Nicholas Salmon. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's gonna, and Nicholas Sandman made off with quite now I guess it was never disclosed, but he was suing each of these news outlets for over $200 million each, and they settled out of court. Now I have no idea how much he settled for, but I imagine
it had to have been a lot because first of all it took him a while to settle, and he was really holding out for it. And I mean the case was his. He could have walked into a courtroom, shown the evidence and got the jury to give him a lot of money. So whatever they settled for, it was a lot.
I'm sure it was. And
I know, Joe.
Just because they called him a racist. Now, with Kyle Rittenhouse, they called him a mass murdering domestic terrorist and put his life and freedom on jeopardy because of it.
Mm-hmm. He's living in hiding right now.
Right.
And they're trying to do the same thing with the jury, and the judge had to issue an order that they had caught someone there with a phone trying to take pictures of the jury. They took the phone and deleted all the pictures, and the judge said if it happens again, they're confiscating the phone.
Yeah. Now, I have to say that this is probably the most egregious example of defamation that I have ever heard of. I cannot think of another case where somebody has been so seriously defamed and it has been this damaging to a person's character.
I think he should, maybe if Kyle is found guilty, he should team up with Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan is I've actually heard he's planning on suing CNN because they try to portray Joe Rogan as, he's pushing pseudoscience and herbs.
The ivermectin thing, yeah.
Yeah, even though, and he pointed this out, and he called, the CNN medical expert on it, saying it's like, listen, yes, ivermectin is used in horse dewormer, but I wasn't using the horse deworming ivermectin. I was using the one that they're using to counter viruses.
Well, see, I have some ivermectin over on the shelf over there for my dog because that's what the heartworm preventative is. It's ivermectin and I think a couple other things. But he wasn't doing grabbing that off the shelf and noshing on it. No. He was getting it the way it's been formulated and used safely in humans for decades for all sorts of things.
Yeah. That's what he.
And the thought I keep having is, what about people who have been prescribed ivermectin for scabies or whatever else it is that they have? They hear that and they go, ivermectin is horse dewormer? Oh my God, my doctor gave me bad medicine. I'm going to stop taking it.
This reminds me of that food babe story where she freaked out about bread being made with some of the same things in yoga mats.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing. You look at an ingredient in something, you find an alternate use for it. I forget what the ingredient you're talking about is called, but it was an ingredient they put in bread. perfectly safe. Nothing wrong with that in food. But, they also use it in yoga mats. And so she said, when you're eating Subway bread, you're eating yoga mats. And she cut, videos of her like, chomping on a yoga mat or something like that. No, you're not.
Yep.
It's just dumb.
It's the classic dihydrogen monoxide scare.
Yep. Hey, we should ban hydrogen hydroxide because they put it in all sorts of foods and everything, but that's nuclear reactor coolant, right?
Hey, remember, airplanes don't pump in pure oxygen. They cut it with nitrogen.
Oh, yeah, because it's too expensive for them to use oxygen. So they're just pushing in nitrogen. Oh, God.
As Joe Rogan said, I can afford people medicine, mother effer.
Yeah.
Bradley McPhee is asking, does ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine work for COVID? The jury's kind of still out on it. The preliminary studies are negative, but preliminary studies are preliminary. If it were the case where the way preliminary studies work is they look for the big effect. So if there was a big effect, like you've got COVID and you're about to be hospitalized, you take ivermectin and 2 days later you're cured, or something big and crazy like that, they would have shown up. It's a lot trickier to say, well, ivermectin in combination with these other things, can have an effect. That's a lot more difficult to study. And when they were doing the whole thing about hydroxychloroquine, they were like, well, there was that one study that was just outright fraudulent, but they were looking at at a few other studies that looked at just hydroxychloroquine, but that was never the claim. It was always, HCQ in combination with antibiotics and zinc. So they were saying you have to combine those together.
The most important thing to look for, at least in my opinion, is a method of action. If they can explain how it does something, or at least how it should do something, then that gives a lot of weight to corollary evidence.
Well, we know HCQ is an antiviral, so it's just a question of does it work with that particular virus. Ivermectin is an antiparasitic, so it may sound strange. It's like, why would that work for viruses? Well, it does kill viruses in human cells in a petri dish. No one exactly knows why, and of course humans aren't petri dishes, but all of the studies, they're finding a negative effect, but they're also saying this is worth looking into more. It's worth doing bigger studies, trying to figure out a mechanism of action and what it works on and how big the effect is.
And the thing is, people,
you can still get some data from non-clinical trials where doctors do things like, well, we know this isn't harmful, so we're going to prescribe it to you, and it might turn out that it helps you, and if it does, well, then that'll help the scientific community identify it as a potential application of it.
A way of using that to lead to how future studies should be done.
JC, can I say?
Yeah, JC. Let me read this from JC. He says, "Unfortunately, I fear this country is screwed, regardless of which way the Rittenhouse case goes. If he gets let off, BLM Antifa starts riots en masse, which could trigger a civil war. And if he gets locked up, civil war could be inevitable for some at that point." Yep.
I will say this. I heard this one funny comedian that said, he wants Kyle Rittenhouse, to be let go. But he says one thing I will admit that will be pretty funny to see is that if he does get sentenced guilty and he is incarcerated, I can't wait for the left media to say, oh, all these right-wing extremists, they're outside the prison getting ready to overthrow the guards and bust Kyle Rittenhouse by forcing to escape him to Canada. And all it is just a bunch of people with signs saying, "Free Kyle Rittenhouse." And they're like, look at them. They're going to take over the prison when all they're doing is just peacefully protesting.
It's going to be January 6th all over again.
Yeah.
With the way things are going, if the jury comes back with any guilty verdicts on any of the murder charges, I think the judge is going to overrule them on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's kind of clear. It's kind of clear you can tell by his attitude that if the that if the jury does say we find him guilty of all charges, the judge, I think he's just going to be like, guys, come on. We know he's not guilty. You only said guilty because you're scared. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna convict or whatever. Shane, what did you say?
Well, the way it would work is you'd get the verdict, and the judge would do the thank the jury and everything else, and then the defense would make a motion to the judge to ask for a judgment notwithstanding the verdict, on the grounds that no reasonable jury could have come to that guilty verdict. And then the judge would rule on that motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that he would rule in Kyle Rittenhouse's favor in that scenario with the way he berated the prosecution in these past couple of days over, mentioning Rittenhouse's pretrial silence and so forth. Yeah, he's pretty mad at them, but I think he would prefer the jury to just come back and say he's innocent.
Yeah, so JC says, can judges overrule a jury's decision? They cannot overrule an acquittal. As soon as anyone says not guilty, that's it. It's done. Everything stops. It's over. They can only overrule a conviction, and I mean, they might do it unilaterally in particularly egregious situations, but generally it comes as a motion from the defense.
Yeah. I will say, going back, I will say this. I like what one person said. One thing that I like what one person said is, like, it's kind of like what happened with David Chauvin, where, now the only difference is that David Chauvin did actually commit a crime, but I do agree with this guy. Derek Chauvin, whatever. Chauvin. Yeah, they said, listen, if any, Derek Chauvin, as much as a criminal he was, the sad reality is that he couldn't really get a fair trial. Even he deserved a fair trial, and it's pretty clear he couldn't get one. So, in all honesty, I think we should have just let him go and show the left the lesson. It's like, listen, I know you're mad, but you got to let justice do this, because if you get there, you compromise everything.
Yeah. You know what I found particularly egregious was things like Facebook blocking links to Rittenhouse's defense fund.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was labeled a mass murderer, and they said, "Oh, yep, supporting him violates our."
As much as I support, private companies being able to manage their own platforms, I could definitely get behind a law that says you can't block defense fund links on social media.
Well, make it a civil offense, not a criminal.
Yeah.
But Rainbow says. Yeah, Rainbow says, I doubt an appeals court would still find him guilty considering what the prosecution has done. Yeah, they have about 1 million appealable issues, I think.
Yeah.
Well, personally, I think.
Let me answer, Master of Muppets. Yes, all of the people Rittenhouse shot were attacking him at the time, and if he hadn't shot, he would have been basically less than a second away, or a second, maybe 2 seconds or whatever, away from serious bodily harm, because they were right on it. Like with the first guy, Rosenbaum, the forensics actually proved that you had, the barrel of the gun. Rosenbaum's hand was either clutching the barrel or was very near to it because of the way the shot pattern. Yeah.
So two people tried.
Wasn't Rosenbaum's hand actually burned from the barrel?
There was this big. It was a weird, because his hand was like closing in like that, and so the bullet took this weird path. But yeah, he had that. He had the powder burns. He had the stippling. He had all of that.
Yeah, and
Gage Grosskreutz. Oh man, when on cross, the defense asks him, "Well, okay, so when you had your hands up in surrender, Kyle did not shoot. Mr. Rittenhouse did not shoot, right? That's correct. It was only when you pointed your gun at him as he shot, right? Correct. And the court reporter, if you watch the video on this, the court reporter, she's down there at the bottom of the frame. She does a double take when he says that. And Grosskreutz gets this look on his face like, because he's just seen $10 million go tweet, 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 and fly away. They cut over to Kyle. Oh my God, Kyle's reaction. He was almost in tears.
Yeah.
He knew at that moment he was completely exonerated. He was completely righteous. Well, and then over at the prosecution, Binger is sitting back with just this kind of big frowny face going on. And Krause, the big guy, is actually face palming. Literally face palming.
Well, we were talking about this before we started. Another thing I like is when the prosecutor was basically trying to say, "Oh no, I know better than you," and all that, and the judge is yelling at him, but the prosecutor keeps going at it. And you look at Kyle's defense attorneys. One of them is like, he's like gasping, like saying, "Binger, what the fuck are you doing?" And the other one is almost laughing and shaking his head as if saying, "Binger, you have not only lost the case, you've probably lost your job, because now after saying this, no one's going to vote you back into office for district attorney. No one's going to vote you back in."
Rainbow Asteroid says, "I didn't see Binger."
Well, I don't know about that, liberal. Anyway.
But anyways, I didn't see Binger try to infringe Fifth Amendment rights. Listen to the podcast coming up because there will be audio of that. But I did see everything about that zoomed picture of the drone video feed. Oh my God, that was such a joke. Because it's not like in Blade Runner where they just zoom in and enhance and everything's perfect. No, you can't add detail that isn't there.
Yeah.
You gotta also love the there was just so many moments in this trial. Like there was that other witness who was being asked by Binger. Binger's all like, "So Rosenbaum said he was going to kill you. Did he say that to Rittenhouse?" He's all like, "Well, Rittenhouse was there, so yeah." Okay, so Binger established that Rosenbaum.
Well, that was there was I think it was McGinnis who he was talking to, and was like, but you've never spoken with Mr. Rosenbaum before, correct? Correct. So you can't really say anything about what Mr. Rosenbaum was thinking at any given time, correct? Correct. So then your claim that he was about to attack Kyle and all that stuff was complete guesswork, right? And McGinnis says, "Well, he said fuck you and grabbed for the weapon."
Another one that really wanted to make me
stop you right there.
one that really made me want to slap Binger across the face was when he was cross-examining Kyle, and he's like, because Kyle's like, "Well, I wanted to bring a gun to defend myself. But you said there was no tension between the crowd and you. Why would you bring a gun if you think there's no tension?" I want to say this, Mr. Binger. Okay, once again, look me in the eyes and lie to you. What do you have a house or an apartment? And yeah. Do you have a nice neighborhood? Oh yeah, it's great. Do you have a lock on your door? Yes. Is there an armed police force that enforces the area? Yeah. Why? You live in a nice neighborhood. Why do you got a locked door? Why you got an armed police department?
I am not expecting my house to catch fire, but I still have fire insurance.
Oh yeah.
I live in a quite nice neighborhood. My car's. I've had someone attempt to break into my car before.
Yeah. I just
you gotta love Binger trying to argue that, well, you had a rifle and he just had a pistol, so why were you in danger?
The only difference between a rifle and pistol is a pistol put holes in someone, rifles put holes through someone.
Because before then, like when he was talking to McGinnis and was like, so Mr. Rosenbaum, but he didn't have a gun? No. He didn't have a knife? No. He didn't have a bat? No. He didn't have a stick? All going through all these things. He didn't have a Stinger missile. He didn't have a lightsaber. He didn't have a Zatnekatel. He didn't have a Vorlon planet killer. He didn't have an ICBM. It's like, none of that matters. Absolutely none of that matters. I think in closing, the defense should point out, although maybe this is something they should have had to get in evidence, but according to the FBI uniform crime reports, more people are killed with hands and feet than are killed with rifles.
Oh, yeah.
He was armed, wasn't he? There are pictures of him carrying around a chain. Is that not?
Well, but he didn't have the chain at the moment he attacked Kyle.
Yeah,
and it was the same thing. It was the same thing with Huber. And it was the same thing with Huber. Oh, he didn't have a gun. He didn't have a knife. He didn't have this. He didn't have that.
Yeah.
Well, he gets to Grosskreutz. It was like, but he only had a pistol and you had an AR-15.
I want to say this.
What did you see Grambo? Oh my God, she was awesome. This lady, she must be like around, I guess, like maybe in her 50s or something like that, like someone's favorite aunt. But she's one of the ones in that picture with Kyle and all the rest. She's the one in the motorcycle helmet. You know, I mean, she gave a lot of testimony on that, but she was like, and Binger was saying like, well, what about, this AR-15 as opposed to a pistol? And she was like, a gun is a gun.
If I recall,
Binger is always referring to the rifle as the AR-15. He keeps saying
if I were on the defense, a lot of YouTube lawyers have talked about what they would do if they were on the defense, and the defense is making a ton of mistakes. Really, Binger is the best lawyer for the defense in this. But one of the things I would have done pre-trial is I would have said, look, calling it an AR-15 is prejudicial. It is not an AR-15. It's a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 Sport 2. We can call it that. Calling it an AR-15, given the way it's vilified in the press, is prejudicial and has no probative value whatsoever. The prosecution is free to bring in evidence about the M&P 15, about its muzzle velocity, about the kind of round it shoots, and what caliber it is. Oh, that was something else. He was talking about like, well, he had this high caliber weapon, and he just had a pistol. Well, he had a 9mm pistol. That is a bigger caliber than the 223.
Oh yeah,
There was
one guy when they were talking about the AR-15. They're like, well, it is a high-powered rifle round. Not really.
No, it's low-powered.
It's a carbine.
That was Binger slipping in. That was Binger surreptitiously slipping in expert testimony. Like when he was trying to question Kyle about the difference between a Full Metal Jacket and a what was it? Some other kind of round. Oh, the hollow point. Hollow points. FMJs and hollow points. And Kyle's like, I don't know. He's not a ballistics expert. He doesn't know. And he was like, but isn't it true that, the whole purpose of an FMJ is to go all the way through the person and hit another person? And the defense like, no, objection. He's giving that was one of the times the judge practically yelled at Binger's like, no, you're giving testimony. That's what you're doing. You need to stop that.
If I had been called in as expert testimony, I would have absolutely excoriated the prosecution on that. The purpose of a Full Metal Jacket is to prevent barrel fouling from the lead projectile.
Is to prevent what? You hold on, Pip. You cut out for a second. Is to prevent what?
It's to prevent barrel fouling from the lead projectile.
Right.
Not penetration.
Well,
and there are
also
of a copper coating of a metal jacket around the lead projectile is to protect the barrel.
Well, and there are also a lot of ballistic advantages, to copper, but it's too expensive to make a bullet out of solid copper, so they do copper coated lead for that reason.
Because you want the primary projectile mass to be out of lead because that's heavy and that gives you kinetic energy. But the copper coating around the bullet protects the barrel and makes it, it prevents deformation of the projectile. It was basically almost standardized very quickly after smokeless powder was invented because of the velocity and the pressure involved.
It was one of my, I forget which video of mine it was, JC, because JC says a 556 delivers more joules than a 9mm. I think it was a 45 I was actually comparing it to, but the AR-15 and a 45 handgun have about the same amount of energy because the AR-15, of course, has a bigger muzzle velocity. All other things equal, the longer the barrel, the faster the muzzle velocity. But the 45 ACP is so much of a bigger caliber that it does more damage to the target. And really, if you have a 9mm or even a 380 with hollow points, it'll have about the same stopping power of a 45 ACP.
Yeah, and I'm going to, can I also say this something too? Because this kind of goes with that. Because another problem is that people, get confused with Full Metal Jacket too. Another reason why Full Metal Jackets are used by the military now, contrary to popular belief, is not because they have higher penetration power. It's actually because they have to. Using any other round besides Full Metal Jacket, like a hollow point, that's in violation of an old war crimes thing.
Yeah, for some reason they don't like hollow points, and I've never understood that.
Yeah, well, but
I'll bet you anything. I'll bet you anything. Because he was trying to say that Kyle should have used hollow points instead of FMJ. I will bet you any amount of money that if Kyle had hollow points in that instead of the FMJ, the prosecutor would have gotten on that and would have pointed to all those international treaties banning hollow points.
Yeah. Fun fact, I've actually heard a lot of military guys are saying they really wish they have hollow point bullets because, people are like, oh, but they inflict nasty injuries. Yeah, but they're also less likely to overpenetrate, so we can actually engage the enemies and not have to worry about the bullet going through their body and hitting a civilian that might be off center.
Yeah, it's like, now some pro gun control woke guy thinks that hollow points are better. Oh yeah, now we see what it takes. Well, we got it on record. We've got a Wisconsin state prosecutor saying that hollow points are better.
Yeah, the purpose of any bullet is to take down your target, right? And hollow points energy in a shorter distance, so it prevents overpenetration, and you can have smaller bullets that accomplish the same thing. Then the same amount of damage. It's so stupid.
Before you answer Darius Thurman, I want to say it's a JC Armaton. Yes, hollow points are less effective against body armor, but here's the thing: people fail to realize that body armor you see on police and military, it's not really that bulletproof.
Yeah, and Clashes also points out that the prosecutor was pretending that it explodes inside the target, which is ridiculous.
It flattens on impact.
Yeah. Okay, another $5 from Darius Thurman. Darius is helping me keep the lights on. Okay, there I am dancing. I was wondering when that was going to come up. So yeah, Darius helping me keep the lights on. Are libertarians too anti-cop in certain situations? Conservatives have to stop seeing all cops as heroes, but sometimes libertarians promote ACAN. Well, because basically that's how it is. Even when you get a good cop, they're not really that good.
Well, and here's another thing I want to.
Show me a good cop that's arresting the bad cops. That's what I want to see in a good cop. Yeah. That's what a good cop would be.
Show me a good cop, and I'll show you a man who's about to get a pink slip.
Oh yeah. The woman in Florida. She was a traffic cop, and there was this other cop who was just abusing his privileges and just speeding his way home, with his lights and siren going just so he could speed around everyone and get home sooner. She pulled it over and gave him a ticket. She ended up having to change her name and move out of Florida because she was getting death threats from all sorts of other cops throughout the state. So that's what happens to good cops.
And I want to say this too. Because the thing is, I wouldn't necessarily say that libertarians are anti-cop. What we're against is monopolization, because the thing is, well,
it's just that when you have monopolization, you don't have accountability, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
that's the lack of accountability.
The problem with the police isn't that we have them; it's that they're a government monopoly. Whereas historically speaking, there was multiple competition. You could go with the state police, but you could also go with militias. You could hire mercenaries or security guards, and if they did a bad job, people wouldn't use them. The problem is that now policing is done by government agents who have backing by public sector unions. So if a cop, uses excessive force or abuses his power, well, nothing can be done because there's so many legal hoops they have to go through.
And I would also like to add that we don't all share the same opinion here. I'm generally think that cops are overwhelmingly defamed. I'd say that there are a lot that most cases of bad cops that you see in the media are usually wild distortions of what really happened, and that cops are by and large a lot better than they seem. But we mostly are opposed to the systems in which cops are a part.
Well, yeah, but the system is made up of individuals. Can you show me a cop who is refusing to enforce nonviolent drug crimes.
Yeah.
Show me that cop.
And who?
Wait, what?
I can
what
show
did
you a
say?
few, but they're not cops anymore. I mean, that personally,
Yeah,
at
true.
least as far as I can see, that's the real problem. It's like you can say all day that it's only a few bad apples. Yes, but the systems that are in place, and especially things like police unions, prevent the bad apples from being removed.
Remember, this is something else Lord Hawkeye did very well, pointing out in one of his videos. The saying is not one bad apple shouldn't spoil the whole bunch. It's one bad apple does spoil a whole bunch. Because if you go to a farmer's market and you get a basket of apples and you bite into one and the first one's bad, you're not going to bother to check the rest. You're going to take them back and ask for your money back, because it's an indication that farmer doesn't have good quality control. And so you can't really trust the apples he's given you. That's why one bad apple spoils the whole bunch.
Yeah, and I was about to say this.
I think our standards for judging cops are way too high. I mean, there's literally millions. There's like 1 million cops. In
I think they're not high enough.
And, there's like 1 million cops in the country, and we get a few egregious examples per year. That's actually a pretty.
But when cops routinely get away with shootings that didn't need to happen, and then when you're someone like Kyle Rittenhouse who actually does defend himself, or with Chris who defends someone else and then finds himself, I mean, if Kyle had been a cop and that had happened and he had shot them, would there be any question about it?
Oh yeah, they would have said, oh well, he was just doing his job as a police officer.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. There's been other examples of police.
The thing is,
only the ones like Derek Chauvin that they want to parade in front of cameras to say, look, we did something. Okay, we got the problem. Everyone stop paying attention to us now. There are no other problems now.
Yeah, and I was about to say this, and I was about to say. And I was about to say this.
Look at the Ma'Khia Bryant case. The cop opened fire on a woman who was raising a knife up and about to stab another woman to death. And he opened fire and he saved that woman's life. And they criticized him for it.
Yep.
Yeah, well, and I was about to say, oh, great. Now I can't remember what I was going to say. You have to keep going. Well, even then. I mean, I'm guilty.
Yeah, JC has a point I'm not sure about. I think it might be the case, but he says, aren't hollow points less effective against body armor? I think they probably are.
Can I say this?
Sorry.
I was about to say yes and no. Yes, they aren't as effective against body armor, but here's the thing. Contrary to what movies and video games portray, body armor worn by police in the military, it's not really bulletproof. It can stop some rounds, but it really mostly slows the bullet so it doesn't penetrate as much.
Well,
and generally
it spreads out the impact is what it does.
Yeah, and generally
so it'll knock you down and it'll knock the wind out of you.
Yeah.
It depends on what the armor is and what kind of round it was hit with from what kind of gun. So soft body armor can generally stop most kinds of handgun rounds and maybe very small caliber rifles. But then you need a ceramic plate armor. And just in that area of the ceramic plate, that armor will be very effective at stopping anything short of a 50 cal.
I want to say this too, because this isn't related to Kyle Rittenhouse, but this was something I saw in a documentary about the North Hollywood shootout, is that and it shows just how little the media knows about weapons and all that. Was they were talking about how the guys in North Hollywood shootout were using steel coated armor piercing rounds, and I wanted to say no, they were not. You want to know why? Because the guns they were using were firing 7.62 by 39, which is the AK round, and most rounds of those are Russian surplus. And the reason why they're steel coated is not because they're meant to penetrate armor. That's just because the Soviet Union did not have the copper to make bulleted jackets, so they used soft steel instead.
My understanding was that they were shooting steel cord. armor penetrating rounds.
That's what the Soviets did. They did that because
that's standard 7.6 Russian ammunition. Every single Soviet surplus 7.6 AK round will have a steel core. Same with a lot of 5.56 NATO. That has a steel core as standard.
Yeah.
Well, and
this is something else, though. Getting back to the Rittenhouse trial, this is something else I would have done if I were the defense. I would have had a ballistics expert come in and talk about the rounds that Kyle was firing. And I would have had her, I'm just going to say she, just to grab a pronoun. I would have had her bring in, the different cartridges and say, this is the 7.65 that's fired by the AK-47. Here's standard hunting rounds. Here's the 308. Here's the 30-06. Oh, here's a big one here. Look at the 50 cal, and have all those like standing up on the end and say, now, here is the 223 Remington that Kyle had loaded into his gun, and they put out that tiny little round next to them.
Yep.
And also show just the bullet. Here's just the bullet that's fired, by Kyle's by Kyle's rifle. And here's a 9mm bullet of the kind that was loaded into Gage Grosskreutz, and look how much bigger around the 9mm is.
Yeah.
I would have had them do that.
Yeah, of course, to be fair, if Gage Grosskreutz had been shot with a 9mm, he might still have a bicep, but...
Well, no, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters at that close range, because it wasn't the bullet that did all of that damage, because the bullet tore the initial hole, but that kind of blast, the vaporization, was from the expanding gases and powder and everything else coming out of it. And you'd still have that with a 9mm. If you shoot at point blank range like that, that can happen.
Yeah, but the 223 has a very high muzzle velocity and creates a significant shockwave. So Gage Grosskreutz bicep exploded because he was shot with a rifle round, not a pistol.
He was shot point blank. That was the thing. He was shot point blank. That close, I don't think it matters all that much.
Oh yeah,
because even if he had a 9mm loaded with blanks, he would have done serious damage to Grosskreutz, possibly even fatal, just with blanks at that range.
Yeah, and here's another thing, going back to the 223 that people don't understand. The reason why the 5.56 was adopted was not because it was high powered yet lightweight. It was because it was discovered through World War II in Korea and the early days of Vietnam that you don't need a big, massive, heavy round with high recoil, which can throw off your aim. Eugene Stoner
target, and those rounds should be just powerful enough to
Eugene Stoner and the Armalite Corporation proved that you can actually use specialized 22 caliber rounds, and they will be just as deadly as full-size rifle. In fact, they'd be even deadlier because, like you said, they're lighter weight, they have little recoil, and you can actually get better shot placement.
Well, not only that, they're cheaper to manufacture. You don't need as much lead for the bullet. You don't need as much power. And when you're waging a war, when you're waging a war, you need to be able to crank out the ammo.
Yeah, you could carry more ammo. Fun fact.
Well, I'm just talking about the manufacturing of it, because wars are expensive.
Yeah. I mean, and fun fact, the 7.62 by 51mm, also known as 308. It's a good round, but the irony is that it actually was not liked when it first came out, and it was only adopted for political reasons. Almost everyone, even the United States military, when they fired the weapons, they hated them. They said, "We hate this round. It's too heavy. It's, it kicks like a mule. We can't stay on target because it kicks hard and has a high muzzle flash." But the Army's like, "No, tough shit, because we're using an American round." We're not using.
That's why they went from the 45 ACP 1911 to the 9mm M9 as the standard issue pistol.
Well, I've heard the reason. Well, I've heard the reason why the 9mm
muzzle flash is a real issue, especially when you have the shorter barrels, like with the FNP 90, and I think those come pretty much standard with flash guards, don't they? For that reason.
Oh yeah.
If you didn't have it, you'd be blind after.
Oh yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, a lot. It's kind of funny because a lot of movie producers, they love those big muzzle flashes, but a lot of ex-military guys or firearms experts say that in real life, a muzzle flash like that is actually detrimental because it can actually blind you, and worse, it can reveal your position to the enemy.
Yep.
Yeah, muzzle flash.
Yeah, that's why you don't want it in a sniper rifle. The thing about a sniper rifle is they can't tell you where you are because you're firing so far away. That bullet is going to hit you before the sound of the rifle gets you, because the bullet's traveling like 3 or 4 times the speed of sound. So the bullet will arrive a few seconds before the sound. When the sound does hit you, it's been reverberating around all over the place, and there's no way you can pinpoint where it comes from.
Oh yeah, fun. Yeah, that's the reason why
it sounds like thunder from lightning.
Yeah, that's why the 1903 Springfield was nicknamed the weapon of silent death in World War II in Korea, because U.S. snipers were so good with it, and that there was an old saying, you'll never hear it because by the time the sound reaches you, you're already dead.
If you hear the shot, it wasn't meant for you.
Yep.
That's what they say, not just about sniper rifles, but just with all rifles, being shot in a war. There have been plenty of soldiers who have been shot and say, I didn't hear the bullet.
Oh yeah, and here's another thing that's a myth about war too, is, the idea of stopping power, about how you got to get a man's gun. And stopping power only works to a degree, but shot placement places more, because I've heard stories of people that have been shot with 7.62 by 39 millimeter rounds, and they didn't realize it until they noticed, oh, I've got blood on me. They wipe it off, but it keeps bleeding. It's like, why is the blood? Oh crap, I'm shot.
Yeah.
Have a look at some of the Australian Victoria Cross recipients. They're like, you look up, you just Google search Australia Victoria Cross recipient charging machine gun, and you'll get results for 8 different people who charged machine gun nests, were shot multiple times, and still won that fight.
Oh yeah,
there were plenty who didn't even realize that they were shot until they got to the medic. They thought they were like bit by a snake or something, like on the leg or something like that. They were like, no, you were shot in the leg.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of people even, that's the thing that people fail to realize. When you're in a high environment like that, you literally, you're being pumped with endorphins and dopamine that you don't feel it. A lot of soldiers have said they did not feel the pain of being shot until several hours after they got treatment, because that's when the dopamine and the adrenaline wore out, and they finally started going, okay, I'm feeling the bullet wound now.
Another $2 from Darius Thurman, who is rapidly becoming my favorite here. Can viewers come on via Discord or StreamYard? You have to be a supporter at Patreon or Subscribestar at any level, and then you have to have your Discord account connected to either Patreon or Subscribestar. That'll get you access to the special live stream channels. There's that takes so long to show up. I don't know why that takes so long, but anyway.
Anyways, Shane, little fun fact, going back to muzzle flashes, because you're talking about them, I learned that the M41A pulse rifle from Aliens, it was used with a Tommy gun. Fun fact, not a lot of people realize this. Originally, it was going to be an MP5, and a lot of the prop experts says the MP5 would have been a better prop because it would have been lighter, 9mm blanks are more reliable, and plus the MP5 was designed models to be able to take things like flashlights and all that, so it had an accessory reel that you could attach props to. But why did James Cameron go with the much heavier and more impractical Thompson submachine gun? Because he's like, the MP5 doesn't produce the muzzle flash.
Yeah. Well, you're telling a story visually, and that's important because, nowadays you don't have to make that much of a muzzle flash because you can always increase it in post, but you still need to make something of a muzzle flash to light everything up properly. Otherwise, it's like, because if you look at the original lightsabers in the original trilogy, and they light up, but it's still a fairly dark area. They're not light sources. They're not lighting everything up. Whereas in the latest trilogy, the props that they were using actually had LED lights in the blade, and they were actually lighting, the actors and everything around them properly the way it actually would.
Yeah.
So lighting is not really something you can fix in post.
A lot of people who are still standing after 5.56 will probably end up on dope. Or here's another thing: maybe you're just missing. There's like this anecdotal story I heard that, and it came from Korea. Granted, it's an anecdotal story, but I think it's still a good story to tell people. It was a story about some people that were, they were complaining about how, they said, oh, this M1 carbine, it sucks. The 30 caliber round can't penetrate. Some teams were complaining that it can't penetrate. It can't even penetrate winter clothes. We shoot them at Chinamen, but they don't stay down and they don't die. This gun sucks. And then finally the quartermaster took a look at them and said, guys, your sights aren't zeroed in. You're missing your targets.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and also in a battle situation, I forget who it was that said, war was long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of blind panic. In those blind panic moments when people are shooting at you, your adrenaline is through the roof. And you can do a lot when you're hopped up on adrenaline.
Oh, yeah.
Well, with the Korean War thing, the U.S. Army actually did a study towards the end of the Korean War, and they found out that most of the complaints about the M1 carbine were from soldiers who were engaging beyond the carbine's effective range. Whereas more seasoned veteran troops would wait until the enemy was in lethal range before opening fire.
Yeah.
And in those cases, it was much more effective.
Oh, yeah.
This one actually came in after a couple of seconds. Another one from Darius Thurman, another $5. I'm loving you, Darius. Crypto question. Does the speculative nature of crypto detract from its means as an alternative to money? Most people see it as an asset to sell later. Yeah, that is the wrong approach. And that's one reason I love Dash so much, is because that's exactly what they are focused on. You can use it as money. Download the Dash Direct app, and you can use the regular Dash wallet or any Dash wallet you want. It's non-custodial, but I mean, you can buy stuff from Lowe's. You can buy stuff from Subway. They support all sorts of stuff that you can just buy, on your own with cryptocurrency. Yeah, good stuff. SKM is saying that a lot of Iraqi insurgents ramped up on things like meth or PCP. You'll eventually go down, but the drugs prevent your brain from registering it immediately. I've heard that, and they're just so hopped up that you shoot them like 7, 8, 9 times, and they're still coming at you, and they know they're hitting it because they see the blood, but they're still coming. I mean, shot placement also, but...
Interesting historical tidbit. During... in the years immediately before World War One, with the Boer War and the Zulu War and all that, the British Webley 455 actually was issued with they called them dum-dum rounds. Instead of a jacketed, bullet-shaped bullet, they would use a solid cylinder of just lead. It was specifically designed to knock someone off their feet.
Okay, Rainbow, quick and dirty idea about the masternode system. The basic way the Dash works is like Bitcoin. It's a code fork of Bitcoin, not a chain fork, like Bitcoin Cash or whatever. But they still get upstream updates from Bitcoin. They're just not implementing a lot of the dumb stuff like replace by fee, which they don't need anyway. But that's the basic proof of work thing. But on top of that, they have the masternodes. Now, to have a masternode, you have to have a server running that has a static IP address and a certain degree of connectivity and all of that. And you also have to have 1,000 Dash in a dedicated wallet. Now, that wallet is still yours. You're not giving it to anyone. But that's kind of like that. By locking that into place, you can still run a masternode, and that's to prevent Sybil attacks. But the masternodes talk to each other and have very secure ways of getting together and have a masternode quorum. They can do things like, verify the transactions within like a couple of seconds, so you don't have to wait for a block confirmation. They lock the chains from reorganization attacks, just all sorts of things. And they also vote on where the treasury funds go every month, because basically at the end of the month, there's a super block created with up to a certain amount of Dash, and people can pay 5 Dash, I think it is, and make a proposal for what they want to do and get money from the treasury to use to things that hopefully will increase the spread of Dash, like Dash Direct. Actually, Dash Direct might have been funded by the diff. That's a different thing. But anyway, so if enough masternodes vote for your proposal, then you get the requested money from that treasury, and they'll do that until they either use up the funds and then everyone else with a lower number of votes misses out for that month, or if there's just not enough that are given out, the remainder of those funds just aren't created. So that's basically how that works. So yeah, it's self-funding, it's secure, it's a really good system. And what crypto would you recommend? Yeah, obviously Dash. That's the one I'm talking about.
And Darius, I posted it in the comments, but no, the M1911 didn't replace the .38 caliber revolver during the Banana Wars. That was the 1920s. It was replaced from, because a lot of people know about the 1898 Spanish-American War, but not a lot of people realize we also had an occupation of the Philippines, and there were some tribes in the Philippines that didn't like the Americans present there, and they would junk themselves up on, powerful drugs, and many U.S. Army troops noticed that that the .38 caliber revolvers weren't working. In fact, they were even shrugging off some rifle rounds, and the only thing that stopped them were their shotguns and Gatling guns.
And JC says, speaking of blockchain, what do you think of NFTs? Those are non-fungible tokens where you actually attach something special to that little token, so it's not fungible like all of the other. I think it's based on Ethereum. And the way people are using it right now is really dumb. Like, oh, this is how I'm going to have IP. I'm going to create a piece of artwork and attach it to this NFT, and then you have to own the NFT to, have the artwork or whatever. It's like, okay, whatever, that's dumb. But think about it a different way. Let's say you've got something physical like a car, and you want to keep track of the title to the car. Oop, another one. Clashes Pride. But you want to tie it to the to the title of the car, and you just say, okay, whoever has this token owns the car or whatever. That might be a better use for it. So, all right, $5 from Clashes Pride. How do you feel about proof of stake cryptos like Tezos? The problem with those is, how do you create the first coins? Because the way proof of stake works is, however many coins you're holding, you get a certain reward for it, and that reward goes up the longer you hold them. But how do you create the first coin? You have to have an Instamine, which means that the people who created the coins have most of them, and if they hold on to them, they just keep making them and making them and making them. So, I mean, it's an interesting idea. Maybe there are better ways of implementing them, but so far I don't see them really going anywhere. Oh, like shares of a company, imagine NASDAQ, but with NFTs. Yep, you could do that. You can say, okay, there's 100 shares of ownership in my company. I have 51. Here's the other 49. And you still have controlling interest in your company, but other people are buying into it. And so whoever would have that token would get the dividends and everything else. So that'll work. Gold and silver or cryptocurrency. This is kind of one of those what are you worried about kind of things. Because in a properly functioning world, it's great to have cryptocurrency because you can instantly buy something in the Philippines or Timbuktu or, wherever they are, Johannesburg, wherever, and just
I will interject. There is an interesting thing that is often overlooked about gold. I think that gold might have the potential, maybe not in the immediate future, but to greatly drop in value, and that is because we are reaching a point in technology where we might be able to actually do some asteroid mining, and gold is as abundant in asteroids as tungsten is on Earth. Yeah,
there's gold in our asteroids. Yep. Yeah,
right.
But I was talking. But what I was thinking about gold and silver was it's like if it's kind of a post-apocalyptic thing where we lose all of our electronics. They have they have a war of pinches or high altitude nuclear bombs that don't destroy people or cities or anything else, but they take out the electronics. Then what do? Having little pieces of gold or silver to trade is a good way to trade locally. So, and you can combine those with NFTs. You could say, okay, whoever has NFTs, this NFT has, this particular chunk of gold, 1 gram of gold or whatever that's in a warehouse somewhere. But in order to claim that, you'd have to get to the physical warehouse. So it just depends. They have different use cases.
I remember hearing somewhere before that most of Japan's gold is actually in discarded electronics.
That might be the case.
Yeah, all of the connections between the plugs and stuff between like a PCI card, the adapter, both the fingers that make the contacts on the board and the board contacts themselves are gold plated. And yeah, so any two components of electronics that plug into each other basically are all gold plated.
Yep. Because you got to protect them from corrosion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the gold won't oxidize. Most other elements will form an oxide layer, which will interfere with the signal. Although, interestingly, platinum has become cheaper than gold in recent years, so I wonder if they're going to start switching over to platinum.
Yeah, that's weird. How would you convert Peter Schiff to being pro-crypto? Well, all of his complaints about crypto are specific to Bitcoin. I'd show him Dash. I'd show him the Dash Direct app.
Peter Schiff lost so much credibility when he was all like, well, the Bitcoin doesn't represent anything. It's just valued just because. And it's like, as opposed to what, the US dollar?
Well, no, as opposed to gold, because he sells gold. So he wants you to use gold.
Okay. And then the other point is, well, it actually is tied to something. It's tied to the resources it took to produce the Bitcoin. So that's
not entirely true, because unlike a gold-based currency, you can't reclaim that. You can't turn in your Bitcoin for a whole bunch of processing power.
Well, but the point is that it took energy to mine the Bitcoin. And
you can't just create them willy-nilly, right? Yeah.
Right.
One person told me, I don't know if it's true or not because your guys are bad at this and that, but one person told me that what you should do is think of cryptocurrency as your checking account and think of precious metal like gold and platinum as your savings account.
That's not a bad way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Ooh, History of the Gold Standard. That might be one. If you want to learn about the gold standard, the book I recommend is from Mark Skousen called The Economics of a Pure Gold Standard. It was written like back in the 90s, but it is great.
Yeah. You know what's one of the dumbest, by the way, Shane, it's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard about in defense of the bank is people say, well, if banks, could better take care of themselves without a central bank, then how come guys like JP Morgan said, yeah, we should get a central bank? Isn't it obvious? So he wouldn't have to pay for it.
There it is. Clash's Pride Super Chat finally shows up. I don't know why it takes so long to do that. And then sometimes it shows up after like a couple of seconds. And while I'm dancing, we've got another one from Darius. Doesn't proof of work go against the subjectiveness of value? Hard work doesn't matter if it's about demand. Well, it's not like the more processing power, the more Bitcoin is created. It's still 1 block every 10 minutes. And it's still going to be, what is it now, 6.25 Bitcoin per block mined or something? Plus the amount that's people are spending in transaction fees. That's
by
the
the way,
reward.
Pipsqueak, I used your country as an example for a friend of mine, because he was debating with a communist, and I said, here's how you can easily debunk the labor theory of value. Okay, take someone who's good at sewing clothes. Make the coziest, comfortable sweater you've ever made. Make sure each individual stitch is good and crafted to its perfection. And now try selling that sweater to a person who lives in the Australian outback in the middle of summer. Yeah. I'm pretty sure they're not going to buy it. You're not going to get any buyers there.
How long before hyperinflation hits SKM? I think it might already be here. Have you seen grocery prices? Man.
Hey, can anyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That's not quite hyperinflation.
So what did you say, Chris?
Prices doubling.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Chris.
I can hear you.
Okay, did you hear my comment about debunking the labor theory of value?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like, how are you going to sell a sweater to someone who lives in the Australian outback, especially in the middle of summer?
Yeah, we heard it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, yeah, sweater might have a bit more value in the Australian outback than you might think. Nights can get really cold if they're cloudless.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, true, but you get the point.
Try selling it to somebody in a more tropical climate.
Yeah, try selling
just the old saying,
in Singapore in the wet season.
Just the old saying, sell ice to an Eskimo.
Yeah.
By the way, do you know what the distance around an igloo divided by the distance across is? Eskimo pie.
Pie.
By the way, a lot of people jokingly say it's like, oh yeah, you can sell sand, to the Middle Eastern people, and it turns out that you actually can. In fact, people are like, what? They sell sand? Yeah, Australia sells a lot of sand to places like the Middle East because it turns out the sand that's found in their deserts isn't good for making sandstone, whereas the Australian sand is.
Well, and there are different types of sand with different like particle sizes and things like that. And a lot of stuff you're using sand for, you don't want to just like go to the beach and get sand because there's a lot of salt in there, and salt will mess up a lot of those uses.
Actually, our biggest export to the Middle East isn't sand, it's camels.
Yeah, I've heard that's actually one thing that a lot of people don't realize about Australia. Australia has a lot of camels.
I didn't know smoking was that big out there.
No.
No,
that's for everyone who thought my Eskimo pie joke was bad.
Yeah, but a lot of explorers in like the very early days of Australian settlement, they brought camels over from the Middle East, and specifically because they're very high quality breeds because they needed to be for exploration.
Yeah, Naruto, that's kind of the thing now. Oh, inflation is good now for some reason. He's talking about Robert Reich, but it's not just him. It's AOC and all those others. Like, yay, inflation!
Just like how Paul Krugman said, "Oh, a hurricane's good; it'll boost jobs."
Even some people I otherwise like Sitch and Adam, get way weird about defending inflation.
Oh yeah, people are like, "Oh, but inflation is good because it means prices are going up, which means the economy's booming." Ignoring that, no, the prices are going up because the value of the dollar's going down.
I really like that one thing on Reason TV. They did what should have happened at the GameStop hearing. And they were all, well, one of the things is it's one of those where they give you clips from it and then they interject their characters as though they're a part of it.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And so anyway, like they were talking about why people are just, using stocks as savings. They're using stocks as savings. Why are they doing that? And one of them comes on and says, I'll tell you why. It's because you guys are running up the debt and the Fed is pushing interest rates down to the floor to the effect that none of us can save any money. And if we did, it would all be eaten up by inflation. So either fix that or shut the fuck up.
Yep.
Yeah, hope Robert Reich loses his savings. Well, he's got that cushy government gig, so he doesn't have to worry about it.
Oh, yeah.
Can anybody say moral hazard?
Well, you know what they say: 2 wrongs make a right.
Yeah, Shane, I ain't gonna lie, I feel a little bit proud because I think I was the one that told you, it's like, Shane, you should do an episode on moral hazards, because that's a topic that not a lot of people seem to understand. They're like, well, what's wrong if the government subsidizes, stuff like this? It's like, you guys never heard of a moral hazard? If if losses are socialized, you don't think about the risks.
Yep, that was based on your suggestion, and now I've got one that's what was it, the Wild Wild West? I could probably do that as a quickie.
Yeah.
I haven't really, this has been such a hectic month. I haven't actually, normally what I like to do is write a whole bunch of quickies at one time. And that way I just have to set everything up and run through them once. And lately I've just been having to do 1 or 2 at a time. And it's really crazy.
Yeah, Shane, actually another interesting thing I've read it because I was reading about moral hazards. They don't just apply to money either. They can actually apply to the non-economic things. Like a perfect example I read about was with bicycle helmets. So many people say you need to wear a bicycle helmet because if you don't wear a bicycle helmet, you'll die if you get into an accident. Now that is true, but they've actually done studies and they've discovered that people who wear, bicycle helmets and the padding, they tend to ride their bikes faster and in more reckless ways. So it's like, So yeah, your head's protected, but you're more likely to get into an accident.
Yeah, that's the Peltzman effect.
Yeah, it's like, listen, I don't care.
That's another one I should do a quickie on, the Peltzman effect.
Yeah.
I'll have to write these down before I forget.
It's like, listen.
Ask if you had done a quickie on it.
Yeah. Like people, I don't care how tough your helmet is. If you get hit by a car going 30 miles an hour, no helmet's going to save you from that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually heard from people that have said, don't get us wrong, wearing helmets is important, but a lot of people treat it like, oh, you wear a helmet and you're safe from everything. And no, you're still at risk. And I still see people who have died and they wore their helmets. Probably one was from a street cop who once had to, patrol the scene of an accident, and a guy died, on a bicycle and he, and he was wearing a helmet. It's like, well, how'd he die if he was wearing his helmet? Because apparently he hit a flagpole so hard he broke his neck.
Well, yeah, I mean the helmet's not going to be perfect, but it's
really going to. And that's
but I mean, the point is you want to consider how people are going to change their behavior, because with every safety system, people are going to increase their tolerance for risk. If they increase their tolerance for risk just a little bit so that there's still a net safety margin, then okay. But if their risk tolerance goes so great that it becomes greater than the amount they're actually being protected, then that's actually a problem.
Yeah, you have to worry about
Peltzman's. I think Peltzman's big idea on this. This was back in the 70s. He was looking at when they started putting the child-proof caps on medicine, and that actually resulted in more kids being poisoned because parents just didn't bother to put their medicine up. They thought, oh, well, the cap means the kid can't get in it. No, the kid can still get in it. Turns out kids are really good at getting into those things.
And not a problem with elderly people just leaving the bottles open with the caps off completely too.
Yeah, because it turns out that people with severe arthritis, which typically tend to be elderly people, had difficulty opening it. So once they got it open, they just left it open because it's like, I can't open it because it hurts my hands to do so. And then 3-year-old Jimmy sees it and says, "Ooh, candy!" While visiting his grandma, and he unfortunately dies.
Well, if you talk to your pharmacy, if you talk to your pharmacist, you can fill out a form that says, I don't want the safety cap. I want just a cap that pops off or whatever.
Yeah, the big danger with the with that effect, especially like with bicycle helmets, is that you'll get like a movement, an advocacy movement, where you want to encourage more people to wear helmets, and then they overstate the benefits and how much it improves your safety, and then the people who are already wearing the helmets feel more confident and then ride more recklessly. So even though, you'll get a few more people to wear helmets, if you're overstating the benefits.
Oh yeah, I mean a lot of experts flat out say, listen, helmets only really protect against skull fractures. They can't protect you against, the concussive force. Listen, if you hit your head on the ground, it's not just, your skull's not just going to crack. Your brain is moving too. I mean, that's what happens to football players, even though they wear helmets. They're not. Well,
that's another example too, because when they went from the leather helmets to the full helmets like they have now, they started hitting each other harder. Same thing with boxers. When they started wearing boxing gloves, they started hitting each other harder, and they have less of the more severe damage like fractures, but they have a lot more concussive damage.
It's also the reason why military helmets, like combat helmets, aren't bulletproof, because if it stops a bullet, there's enough kinetic energy in that projectile to snap your neck. So, especially with modern combat helmets, it's designed to primarily prevent against shrapnel and things, but they also try and get that middle ground of, reducing the penetration of the bullet so it doesn't go into your head, but also not being so protective that it's going to give you a serious neck injury.
Well, it can also protect you if it's like a grazing shot.
It will not snap your neck. Conservation of momentum here. The bullet striking your helmet is not going to put much more. It's not a much more momentous as if you held the butt stock of the gun against your head and pulled the trigger. That's about the same amount of force that it puts on your head.
Yeah, not snap your neck, but it's going to give you a serious neck injury. That's what I mean.
It could pull a muscle.
I also think, and Clash is talking about a newer product from Sweden that's basically an airbag for bike riders. I think one consequence of this, real just crazy ideas of safety and how we have to keep everything safe, from everyone, basically from cradle to the grave, is that people don't really go through the natural process of learning how to manage risks. If they keep thinking that, things are, being protected from them, when they enter an area where they're not protected, they don't know how to handle it.
Oh yeah,
I'm used to doing that.
I mean, I've actually read somewhere that's actually the reason why kids, who are constantly being told to be obedient to their parents, that's why they end up getting involved in bad people, is because they don't know how to take risk assessments. When you coddle them, they don't know how to think, and they just listen to an outside voice. Whereas kids, who are a little bit, who have, parents like Lenora Skenazy, their kids tend to be more independent and better because they learn from their mistakes. They learn that if I jump off this high of a tree, if I try to climb a tree, that clearly can't support me, I fall and I get hurt. And as Gavin said, from that one show, it's like, listen, as much as we don't want to admit it, pain is a really good teacher,
Mm-hmm.
Heck, I remember when I was a little kid and I was running around like a maniac. If I was running around and I crashed into a wall and I hurt myself, you know what my dad would always say to me? He would always look at me and go, "Now, what did you learn?"
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you know not to do that again, don't you?
Yeah. He would be like, "Now, what did you learn?" And I would be like, "Watch where I'm going when I'm playing." And he's like, "Yep, that's why you got hurt, because you weren't watching where you were going."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my wife and I always get into arguments over how, she always wants me to be right there, ready to catch the kids if they fall. When they're, sometimes they'll climb up onto the back of the couch, and she's all like, "Alex, look!" And I'm all like, "What? If he falls, he might get a little bump on his head, or, it's not going to kill him."
Yeah.
Don't let him get too many head injuries, or they'll end up like me.
Yeah.
I mean, that might not have been the best example. Usually, it's things where there's more of a risk of him maybe scraping a knee or.
Well, and something else you'll want to do is make an environment where they can get into everything and climb on everything they want, and they can fully explore their environment. Don't have an area where you say, "Oh no, you're not allowed to go in there," and you have to stop them if you have like, cleaning chemicals or something like that. Put them, up on a high shelf in the closet or something like that where they can't get to it. But the areas that they can explore have everything there, things that, they can, crawl to, climb on, grab a hold of, put in their mouth, all that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. It kind of reminds me.
I draw the line at hospitalization.
It kind of reminds me of this one episode of Super Nanny I watched a long time ago where this one grandma says, I love my grandkids, but I can't invite them over to my house because they destroy everything. So Super Nanny says, okay, let's go to your house. And she's like, okay, I got a question. Where are the toys? Where are the games? Where's the grandchildren room? And she's like, oh, I don't have one. It's like, well, that's why your kids are destroying your house. They don't hate you. They're bored.
They're exploring their environment. They're trying to find things they can play with.
Yeah, that's why you have the toy room. That's why grandparents, that's why grandparents, you need to have a toy room for the grandkids so they have that area to explore and burn off that energy.
My parents stopped putting child-safe, like little child-safe latches on all the cabinet doors because I found it highly entertaining to figure out how they work and break into them.
Oh, God, we learned that lesson with Sinclair. Every single child lock we put on everything, he figured out how to undo.
Yeah.
It got to the point where my dad was putting one on like the last cabinet in the line. He looks over and I've already done like 3 of them on the other side.
Well, yeah, it's the pink elephant effect, Yeah, it's what I jokingly call the pink elephant effect. If I tell you, don't think about pink elephants, what are you thinking about now?
A pink elephant,
about blue giraffe.
Quick, don't think about cats. Meow, meow.
I think people often underestimate how smart kids are. I remember.
Oh, absolutely.
Quick! Don't think about Joe Biden with his clothes off.
Oh God. On that note, okay. Before we go any further and get completely kicked off of YouTube, we should probably wrap this up.
Wait! Don't think about Shane with his clothes off.
Please don't. Please don't. That's bad. No. Bad.
I am. You guys go to work.
I am. I am thinking about Shane without his clothes, and it's making me upset. He's more beautiful than me. I'm hideous and ugly.
The next time you talk to your boss, you're going to think about making out with him.
Oh God.
Okay. You're now breathing, blinking, and swallowing manually.
Well, fun fact.
Which also means when you look at this enlargement of a highly pixelated impact artifacty thing that we've run a bunch of filters on, you'll see Kyle Rittenhouse pointing a gun at someone.
Well, and I was about to say, going back to the pink elephant thing, that's actually why a lot of parental and childhood psychologists say, listen, if you want to give instructions to your kids, tell them exactly what you want them to do. Don't say, don't go on that, don't go on there, don't go on there. Tell them exactly what you want to do. If you want them to stick by you, say, don't say, hey, don't take off without mommy or daddy. Say, hey, mommy and daddy would like you to stay close to us, because it gets them focused on that,
All right, so final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Nope.
Every kid is different. There's rarely times where you can come across good parental advice that just applies, because kids are just so different.
Glad I made it for the first time in ages.
Yeah, it was great to have you on, Daniel. Thanks.
Fun.
Yep. If you are imagining me naked, please be generous in the.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to thank everyone who joined. That's Darth, Forth, Pip, and Daniel. And that's all. We didn't have someone who came in and left, did we? I think this is everyone. And we've got some super chats I need to thank. There's Clash's Pride. He did a couple. Darius Thurman, I think, is just keeping me going.
You're my best buddy. You're Shane's best buddy now. As long as you keep,
you're my best friend. You get to come over to my house and have lunch or something.
Yeah. I'll let you come over and F my sister.
Okay, we're not going that far.
That's a quote from Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
All right, and thanks everyone who commented, and thank you for watching. Until next time, stay strong